This is the Miller philosopher. One of the few complaints I've heard about regarding the original Lord of the Rings trilogy was the portrayal of Aragorn. Long and short of it being that in the books, Aragorn is a strong, assertive, and competent leader from the get-go. That despite his haggard appearance, there is something kingly about him and how he presents himself. He seems to be confident in anything and everything that he does, and whenever his Númenórean lineage is brought up, it's almost like he can't help but boast about it, and how his sword, Anduril, is of that same lineage. Yet his on-screen portrayals seem to many longtime fans of the books to be a far cry from this future king. In the movies, he seems dangerous at first, but more timid and much more cautious. In the Fellowship, he feels more like a second in command and thus just one of the guys, rather than someone of extremely high importance. For example, when Boromir is first presented with the information of who exactly he is, he basically ignores it and talks down to him and just basically says, go fuck yourself, we don't need you. And rather than defending his position and his lineage, this Aragorn seems to back down. Rather than fight Boromir, or at least debate with him about the importance of the Dunedain in the north, and just why they're so important and how proud they are of how, despite being nearly extinct because of their own history, that they're still around and have been able to accomplish much in protecting the north of Eriador from unknown threats that Gondor was not aware of. And the question that comes to my mind regarding this criticism is, would a more book-accurate Aragorn had worked in the movie format instead of what we got? Now, on the one hand, you could say yes, given that there were many movies during the 90s and 2000s and before that had plenty of strong protagonists that were confident and assertive without being domineering assholes. Or that perhaps they were assholes, but were assholes with hearts of gold, meaning well, but just didn't come across right. So that basically we as the audience forgive and overlook the flaws of those characters. And from that perspective, the movies could absolutely have shown Aragorn as who he is in the books. The other perspective is that book Aragorn would not have worked in the trilogy because no one outside of the hardcore fans would be able to identify with him. For example, you could easily make the assumption or argument that there are times when Aragorn comes off as kind of arrogant and privileged, given how much he goes off about being from the Númenóreans. Even at one point threatening Rohan guards when they ask for his sword before he goes into the King's Hall, because as far as he's concerned, no one else is supposed to touch Anduril. And if they do so, it's on pain of death. Yet, these aren't orcs or Sauron, and this was just a legitimate security precaution. What's the beef? Would it be true that he's a Middle-earth VIP? Yes, absolutely. However, to the casual audience new to Middle-earth, no one would care, because this would-be king is acting like an overprivileged princeling. It's a common balancing act with the hidden king trope. You want the protagonist to be or become aware and proud of who they are at some point, but not so much that they come off as arrogant to the audience or as a one-note person that has no other interesting qualities about them beyond, I'm supposed to be the king, or queen as it might be. In the movies, I think Boromir plays off this aspect very well, ironically. In a way, you could maybe argue that for the first half of the movie of Fellowship, he's more Aragorn than Aragorn. As a movie maker or showrunner, you need the audience on your side if you're going to make someone the hero. You have to make them care. Hence the hero's journey trope. And why I think Peter Jackson and the producers made Aragorn come off as a lesser person of importance, as it were. People can identify with someone who has made mistakes in his past or comes from a past of others who have made big mistakes that has effects on them. And movie Aragorn takes this box off because he's ashamed of what the Numenoreans did thanks to Isildur. People emphasize more with a character who is more open with his vulnerabilities and not hiding them from others just to appear strong and confident. Indeed, there are other YouTube videos that praise this incarnation of Aragorn as being the paramount example of what modern and proper masculinity should look like. And, most important, audience often side with the underdog because of his struggle to become their destiny and reach the top. It's the Rocky Balboa story. It builds humility into the character so that by the time that they fulfill it, they're not, again, assholes. Just compare Game of Thrones' Jon Snow to King Viserys or Robert Baratheon or Joffrey, for example. The latter three are born into that privilege and they're proud of that and they rub it in everyone's faces. So much so that they abuse that power horribly and tragically in many ways. While as Jon Snow doesn't even know he's a king until much later on in his life. And by that time, he has dealt with so much and suffered so much as people seeing him as a bastard and whatnot, that by the time he becomes, King of the North, he is well respected and he treats that position with respect, even to the envy of his sister, who feels that she is more proper for the throne because she's smarter than him. The Lord of the Rings movies, however, don't forget about Book Aragorn though. Aragorn still becomes kingly and throughout the trilogy also steps up to more authority as the trilogy goes on, so that he becomes what longtime fans might be more familiar with. And it worked. By the final act of Return of the King, Aragorn has become the book Aragorn, as it were, and because we have seen him struggle and get to that point, we side with him. He doesn't come off as a jerk or overprivileged. He comes off as someone who has earned that position while not just being born into it. Thus, Aragorn is now one of the most recognized and most beloved protagonists in modern cinema. And it has played a part in both growing the fan base and encouraging people to read the books even more so. So, back to the question. Would book Aragorn work on screen? Yes and no. If handled well, book Aragorn could become a cool character and recognized as a good guy. But at the same time, no, because without that audience recognition of his struggle and whatnot, he would not have become as iconic and legendary a character in the cultural zeitgeist on the levels of, say, Luke Skywalker, for example, doomed to recede into the rest of Hollywood's past heroes that are forgotten or are collecting dust as part of Hollywood's past era of glory. But having said that, let me know your thoughts below. Otherwise, it's the Miller Philosopher. Have a good day.